and we're live. Dr. Breck and Mr. Wright. And tonight, Mr. Wright, we're talking about the subject of horticulture, which should be of profound interest to all our many listeners out there. And
Well,
can you
yeah.
go ahead and just briefly tell me how you became interested in the subject?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Breck, for having me on. It 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 certainly appears the longer we converse, the more I find that um, we've walked similar paths, and to know a fellow plant person is it just makes my world a bit more rich. To be able to talk on such matters, I do have a bit of an obsessive streak on a variety of affairs, to include the world of botanical herbs, and then of course mushrooms, and the whales that reside under our feet, the mycelial network, that is fungi. This is something that's been intensely interesting to me on a number of levels. So I guess where it all started, it was really in the military. It was on my way out. I was finding methods by which I can improve my own wellness. So I was touching Ayurvedic herbs, Shilajit, ashwagandha, some Chinese herbs, reishi. So really adaptogens and nootropics. And I found that I had this surge of energy. I was just unstoppable. Things have since changed in the ensuing decade plus, after the military, you sort of slouch a bit. But nevertheless, herbs have been a permanent fixture on my life ever since. I had a GI Bill, and I didn't walk into this program. I went to graduate school, in fact, for botanical medicine, but I knew there wasn't going to be a job at the end of it. I didn't intend for that. In fact, I looked at it as a hobbyist degree, and just taking a look at the literature, the scholars of the past, they treated these disciplines as such. They were gentlemen who had their various interests, which today would now be called spurgery or autism.
Well, let's go to, I guess, Carl Linnaeus was
Yep.
one of the founders of this, and you had to have, in his day, I assume, a certain amount of leisure to study, and leisure
Yeah.
meaning freedom from having to earn your bread by the sweat of your brow on a daily basis. So, and take your
Mhm.
time and your magnifying glass and go abroad, observing the flora and fauna with your notebook.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so in preparation for this, I simply didn't prepare. I figure I'd wing it and leave it to the undying obsession, like I said, with these sort of things, and with the idea that the information would flow. Carl Linnaeus himself was a 1700s Swedish botanist, if memory serves, and really the father of the system of cataloging life, the varied forms of life, the varied families of life, and the overarching or governing taxonomy that permeates all things. So that's everything from kingdom plantae, animalia, fungi, through to, even oddly enough, to the mineral kingdom, proposed mineral kingdom. He was on the fence on this, but he was actually cataloging geodes and crystals. And then we find that this didn't take on necessarily, although there's always been some form of interest. But then, sure enough, in the 19th century, we have the purported highest IQ individual to have ever lived. Of course, how do you measure such a thing? William James Cetus, with his The Animate and Inanimate, which actually posits that very thing, that geological structures do indeed harbor some form of life, And he advances it through a fairly non-metaphysical um, lens. So it's very fascinating stuff. But anyways, um, I fashion myself a bit of a Linnaean myself. I plop me in the woods anywhere, and the Latin just starts flowing. It's just something that I've been intently focused on throughout my life. And there's something to understanding the scientific name behind a plant or any sort of flora fauna that tells you something about it inherently.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I grew up. Uh, One of the main things, two of the main things we were interested in was the preservation of the echinacea plant in Missouri, because
Yes.
prior to the highway
Echinacea
department,
purpurea, correct? Yep.
yes, prior
Yeah.
to the highway department seeding the echinacea on all the shoulders on the sides of the highway in the mid '90s, echinacea was kind of scarce, and
Mm,
so was ginseng because it had been all dug up from the Great
yeah.
Depression on to
Zinzibura.
yeah
Yeah. Hmm.
to the so-called sing, as they called it in the Ozarks when they were digging it. They dug it all up, so where you couldn't even find ginseng in the Ozarks, and it became virtually extinct. So we started building these platforms where it could return to
Wow.
the, because it only grows in a certain dense, or it grows best in a dense forest, which doesn't happen much anymore because they log it every 20 years. So my point being that while we had more success with the echinacea, most people don't seem to understand the relevance of even maintaining a basic understanding of herbs or general flora and fauna in any given area. So just as we have forgotten any appreciation for
Mm.
groups of people in specific areas and any kind of nativity, people have lost an interest in studying native plants and native
Yeah.
wildlife. So I find that a very interesting correlation.
You see it worldwide, really. You see communities whereby the youth, and you're exactly correct, they just don't want to learn it, you know. Um, I did some field work at one point, just kind of, I was really doing sort of a survey of an immigrant population on the East Coast, and I just by happenstance had learned that the first generations maintained the knowledge base of working with the plants, but the second generations it was virtually nil, right? So that's interesting that you see the same phenomenon in the Ozarks. One thing you mentioned that really interested me, you were calling it the sang, probably apostrophe SENG or what have you. Every region will call a plant. It'll there will be a name affixed to that plant that would vary regionally and locally. Sometimes in the research you'll find that a plant will assume the name of an alternate or cousin plant, thereby confusing the record. Um, so in providing your diligence in scholarship, this is just something that you come upon where you see that the aerial parts in an illustration are definitely more representative of plant B as opposed to A, and then you can reconcile that information. But that's just sort of an aside.
I did not know that, so that's very interesting to be aware of. We had more luck with the echinacea, as it's proverbially known as a snake root, and we used to use it to actually treat snake bite in animals, though never people. But
Yeah.
just because you don't want to risk a person just treating them, but we had good success treating animals with large doses of snake root. But
Oh, there's a
that is
veterinarian application to this, huh?
yeah, and
Wow.
that was something that almost nobody knows about anymore. And it was an old Native American deal that I can't say was handed down to us because we found it separately. But it is very discouraging that most of the tribes in specific reservations have no particular understanding of the herbs and plant life of their particular reservation or area.
Yeah.
Some other stuff that is in the Ozarks that I've always been taught about was comfrey, burdock, also
Mm,
known as soldier's woundwort, and things like that,
yeah.
which we use a lot. And I always bring. I didn't bring it to St. Louis, but I usually bring it wherever I go because there are usually a few broken fingers or other sundry body parts. And nip bone, as comfrey is also known in the Ozarks, is very
Comfrey is a
handy.
powerful herb. It can be misused, can it? You can do some, from what I understand, it's one of the more invasive or medically invasive, therapeutically invasive plants when you don't have the respect or the understanding of what you're working with. Is that accurate? I've never worked with it.
I would definitely not use it internally. Externally,
Yeah.
it's very powerful. Internally, we used to make a tea of it, but I don't. I have never. Might have drunk it a few times as a kid, but I've never drunk it as an adult. It's supposedly can be very damaging to the body.
So topical, it's more of a topical plant, as would
Yes.
be another very powerful plant, bloodroot. It has its uses, but certainly it's advisable that the practitioner knows what they're doing.
Yeah, that can
Yeah.
also be poisonous, I believe, if misused. So these herbs are just very interesting, and again, getting back to the point, I have not heard anybody talk about them for years. If anybody, even in this region, wants some, they buy them
Mm,
on Amazon. Now I know
wow.
people who raise them domestically, but it used to be the case that you could go into the woods and simply harvest some of
Right.
these herbs, but they don't seem to grow wild in the quantities they used to due
Mm,
to the regular harvesting of the timber, which affects the whole ecosystem.
sure. Well, there's the whole principle of le of if you're to harvest, if you're to leave you're gonna leave quantities behind, right? For the proliferation of the herb. It's sort of it's an ethos that's embedded within Western herbalism, among other herbalist traditions. And it's like you said, it's more than just a what can I use these herbs for, but it's also a lifestyle. And with that, we live with the plants. Might sound hippy dippy, but it's very much true. And you see the effects of that deforestation. I wonder if bees and pollinators are a key component as well. Would growing milkweed in these select locations I don't know. That's just something I've considered anyways with the supposed dwindling of bee populations.
I used to keep bees a lot, and that has been a big negative area as well. I was telling somebody about just a lot of strains of not just flora and fauna, but also trees, I guess, which would be under flora and fauna, have gone
Yeah.
extinct just in my lifetime in the Ozarks. Like I was telling someone about the
Wow.
chinkapin trees, which were very normal
Yeah.
in Missouri and now are non-existent, at least in southern Missouri.
I
And
know that from Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear, the Chickapin Hill. That's that's all I know about that.
well,
Uh,
they're not.
what is that? Describe that. Was that in your childhood, this tree?
Well, it was very rare to run across one in my childhood, and because there was a blight that came through and killed all of them. But
Mm,
they're
yeah.
an interesting, particular, not dissimilar from maybe the Brazil nut.
Mm.
Uh, Not the Brazil nut, but similar to the Brazil nut. Another deal that I think has been affected by the lack of bees is the pawpaw tree, which is a type of.
Ah, Azamina triloba. I
Yeah,
love it. I've got 6 of them growing in my yard. Hopefully they survive the winter, but yeah.
well, they
Do you
should.
do you feast on pawpaw?
Well, when you can find them, but that's the thing.
Oh, they're so good. Yeah.
They used to be way more common, and now
Hmm.
once again, And it used to be a phenomena of every couple of years because the frost would habitually get them every other year. Young,
Yeah.
they get them young, so you would never get any fruit. But that's another
You
example of something
you
I think.
surprised me here, given not to cut you off, but I feel I must. Respectfully, I talk to people about the pawpaw, I bring it up, and you'd be surprised how few people even know what that is. This is Missouri's state fruit. This is the Native American fruit. I mean, it is the largest and maybe most significant native fruit of North America. I mean, it's they can be upwards of the size of a mango. Thomas Jefferson wrote about them. Mark Twain, of course, talked endlessly of them. Um, Related, they're really an anomaly. They're a tropical fruit, but they're just so hardy and just so rugged and capable of surviving ice ages. Literally, it's the chair. It's I guess cousin of the cherimoya, which they're very delectable. They're in Central America, South America, but it just kind of branched off from that familial root, migrated northward, got stuck in a series of glaciers, and sort of did its thing, evolved or what have you, adapted to its terrain. Glacier then opened up, and it slowly populated what's present day North America. It's really the anomaly. It shouldn't be here, and yet here it is.
It's a fascinating tree, and it also has properties that are anti insectoid or
Hmm.
and are just it's a very
And
useful tree, and there are a few orchards of them that people have planted, like yourself and others, but in the wild, they're very rarely seen anymore, and
yeah,
they're
it's
going.
almost if you find a place, it's kind of like morels, or kind of like, you just keep your mouth shut, and like that's the place you go to. But I mean, if you guys find your way out here in September, we'll feast on pawpaws. Consider it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know at one time there was a lot of recipes people used for pawpaws, which are now not even considered because there's not enough pawpaws to actually cook. We just have to enjoy
Yeah.
what we can get fresh, kind of like
I there I met an old gentleman. It was Endless Winery, I believe, somewhere in mid Missouri. But his whole deal was he made exotic wines. Just this kooky
oh,
guy. And which is way cool. He made like a pecan wine. It was great. I don't drink anymore, but I really like that these fruit wines. But he was pretty intent on, he wanted some pawpaws. He wanted to make a pawpaw wine, and
oh,
I had attended one of the pawpaw festivals. They happen like in Ohio and a couple of different places annually, and you get to see some of the experimentations of different. It's almost like every food truck will have a pot, like a some item on the menu that features pawpaws, um, which is kind of cool. But to your point, you just don't see it. And there's also the question, one begs the question, why don't you see it in the stores, in the supermarkets? Well, it's probably for the same reason you don't see the cashew fruit. It's a great fruit. I love it. It's very juicy, but it doesn't have the staying power. It rots very quickly. So it's just never been a realistic endeavor to ship or to handle the pawpaw. You have to, like you said, you have to either know somebody or you find it in the woods. But there's a whole tradition behind it, and there are enthusiasts behind the pawpaw, which is great.
yeah, and they'll probably be people like yourself will probably be all that keeps it alive in it from virtual extinction. But going
Hmm.
on, and helps our listeners understand the importance of this field of study and its relevance to them, even though they don't have any specific interest in the subject.
Yeah.
Another tree would be the of the Ozarks would probably be the persimmon tree.
Ah, yeah, persimmon. Yeah, a couple of wild persimmon trees on the property. Do you ever you've tasted them before? You've
Oh
worked
yeah,
with
I grew up
them?
on them.
Yeah, lots of recipes, old school recipes, full recipe books from the grandmothers of the past that get into it. I'm sure you know somebody out there that that is really stretched the persimmon in unique ways.
Oh yeah, my grandmother made a lot of stuff with persimmons. We had a small orchard, and that was an anomaly at the time, but apparently in the early 1900s there were a lot of persimmon orchards in Missouri. So
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Cultivated, huh?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, you see it in you see it in in vintage classic literature. They're described like a common, they're it's a mainstay of any, table. So
but
yeah. So the importance, let's talk a little bit about that. For me, there's definitely it's gone beyond the practical. So some folks would actually find interest just in exploring it. I find there's stories behind these plants. There's the people behind the plants. It's not just merely the plants, it's the stories of how did they get their name, famous plants in history, right? There's oh, I wish I could recall the name of the painting, but there's a painting of General Washington. I think uh, and you know, most folks look at Washington on his steed and the men around him. I'm looking at that mullein plant that's positioned to the lower right. May call it the spurg in me, but yeah, but Verbascum thapsus, the mullein plant, it's a significant plant because it's not native to the Americas, but it's also called the English coltfoot. It's a Mediterranean plant. They call it the English coltfoot because the seeds likely, they likely went with the settlers and then promulgated across the Americas that way. And there's whole stories. It goes back to the Roman Empire, this plant, so there's that piece, the story behind the plants is intensely fascinating, the traditions behind the plants. There's also the you might need to know these plants. I mean, I used to be more of one of these like prepper types, these like, world could end tomorrow types, and I've since matured in this ideation. I believe in God, and I believe He provides, and that I don't necessarily, Anne and the Grasshopper is certainly a parable worth studying, and Noah's Ark, certainly you do what you can, but at the end of the day, the Lord provides for the birds, and so surely He'll provide for us. But at the end of the day, anyways, you're going to need to know these plants. They quite potentially. Um, I enjoy bringing herbs home and using them as needed. I enjoy collecting, foraging and collecting wild mushrooms and scaring my wife nearly to death. She's thinks that she believes my ID skills are waning, but I'm still kicking. So hopefully I don't miss ID one of these days. But and then there's also, the homeschool advantage of studying plants where the Latin is concerned. The scientific names behind these plants, they open up whole domains of information where, I can get by reading Latin, in other contexts, by forming a basis. Not only medically, I have a bit of a medical background. It's long since retired, but it's rooted in Latin, and then of course the botanical stuff, the mycological stuff, and it makes for a decent what have you, a decent vernacular by which one can understand the great works of the Western world.
that's really interesting, and I did not know the background of mullein that you just related. We always called it Indian tobacco
Hmm.
as a kid, and apparently it doesn't.
Lobelia inflata. That's a separate plant. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it's entirely probable that within your region, that's exactly what it's called. So I'm not going to argue the fine points, but please keep going.
Well,
Yeah.
I knew that was not its correct designation, so it doesn't surprise me that that was separate. Separate.
Yeah.
There's a separate designation for a different plant. But what I was going to get at is I did not know the history of it prior to its bringing to North America, and I know that it too is getting rarer to find because I'd like to find some for my wife to smoke, but it's
Yeah.
hard to find. When I was a kid, it just seemed like we bring home lots of leaves just out of the forest and we dry them, for tea more than smoking. But
Well,
uh,
that's so interesting that you were able to you were able to zero in on that. The mullein plant is very much copacetic with women. I mean, it's do the reading on it. It's mullein is very much, for whatever reason, it's very therapeutic for women. So, in a variety of ways. But yeah, so you were able to kind of auger in on that. Plants, I can tell. Yeah.
well, I had good teachers more than anything, and most of what I know comes from them rather than books. But not
Yeah.
to say I would like I have books, but I've never learned specifically. It's from just being out in the woods with people who knew what they were doing more than anything. But
Get you a good
let's
field guide.
yeah, it really is. It's
Yeah.
helpful. But let's get back to your favorite subject, which is mushrooms, which are
Ha.
not lacking in the Ozarks.
Yeah. Ha ha. Do you do mushroom hunting,
I
mushroom
know
foraging?
nothing about mushrooms.
Oh, do you have mycophilia or mycophobia,
No, no, I
rather?
just don't know. I was not trained in mushrooms. I just know
Yeah, yeah.
plants.
That's okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, the thing I find with that, there's a few mushrooms out there which don't have the poisonous lookalikes. If you know what you're looking for, maybe have somebody. Full disclaimer, I'm not insisting that folks just go off and just start eating, whatever they see. But have a teacher, have somebody kind of show you, observe it, look at it, go, oh, you know what? The poisonous thing is it's hollowed out inside. This is an infant destroying angel, and that will definitely kill you. Um, so just look out for that, morphological attribute, that morphology. And but there's some things, especially the polypores, which are the mushrooms that grow upon the substrate of fallen logs and whatnot. A lot of those are adaptogens. The turkey tail, for instance, very popular in Indian medicine. Indian is in across the Atlantic. Um, uh, and there's not too many poisonous varieties of polypores. So those are more of the medicinal sort. They're more woody in nature. I could talk about this stuff all day. I really enjoy delving into it. They're really a strange thing. Mushrooms, they're not plants, they're not animals. They have constituent. They have. Well, I would say phytochemistry. They've got a chemical makeup that's shared between plants and animals, but they're distinctly their own kingdom. So they're aliens, basically. Some would argue. I mean, where did
yeah.
they come from? I don't know. One can speculate, but then there's also the whole I don't really the Joe Rogan types have kind of just like they've really kind of just what is it it's lost its novelty a bit, but nevertheless the psychedelic aspects of mushrooms too is quite fascinating, that we're able to interface with these life forms in a way that's it's still so much there's just so much mystery behind that whole thing. So
Well, I have a question and kind of that's based on an idea, and this goes related to mushrooms. They spring up from the recent soil or from the
yeah.
recently dead material, and I wonder how much consciousness some of them have in them
Mm.
that
Oh.
that
Oh.
because of that recent dead, they come out of the recent dead, and how much
Oh.
consciousness can they retain? And I don't know.
Hmm.
This is like something I wonder if you've thought about it all.
I'll say this much. I'll just kind of add this well, okay. There there's been studies on groves of trees who use the mycelia under the earth as a sort of network, a wood wide web, if you will, a literal network whereby they can fire off uh, alleles or um, chemicals that are invasive to neighboring groves. There's warfare that's occurring throughout this mycelial network, where these competitive groves are killing. They're engaged in warfare. So there's that piece. Um, there's that element of interfacing with fungi in this relatively symbiotic manner. But then there's also the cordyceps, which I find very fascinating. Those are the parasitic fungus that will take over the caterpillar and replace it in its entirety. So, leaving behind a sort of wooden caterpillar. It's taken over the full cellular structure of this thing, and possibly even affecting its behavior. So there's definitely something there. I think there's a language behind mushrooms that's not human, nor is it plant related. It's fungal, and we just simply don't. There's so little we know about this thing. Um, you talk to any of the great mycologists out there, and they'll probably um, concur, that there's just they'll readily admit that there's so little we know about mushrooms, truly. And then to get even further into Spurg territory, I'm way into lichens, which are the composite multi. They're really colonies sharing cyanobacteria, plant, and mushroom all together into this one organism. So the lichen that you see, the old man's beard flowing from the tree, the crustose lichen on the rock, and I know you notice them because you're out in the woods quite a bit. These are not singular organisms, but rather a colony of three separate kingdoms that are combined into this one structure, each aiding in the total preservation of the multi-organismal and at this point entity. So
That's
the plant would provide the photosynthesis, the cyanobacteria the same. Um, there's some other components to that, or some other features to that bit, and that's animalia right there. And then the mushroom itself would support the structure of the lichen.
that's absolutely fascinating. And what
It is.
one of the things I find interesting about this, and I'm going to hopefully we'll segue in a minute to something we were talking about off screen, but moss and lichen, I don't know how I did
Hmm.
that. Lichen and mushrooms, all the
Yeah.
product, all happen fairly rapidly out of like contemporary matter, whereas uh, a lot of other plants or life forms, they basically have a different growth path than these stuff.
Yeah.
These have a more direct contact with the soil and with whatever biodegrades and produces them. So it's almost like they have a different, I know mindset's not this life cycle, but
Mm.
also way of interacting with the world and have their own like mind
Yeah. Yeah.
than other kinds of plants.
They operate
Mentality,
differently, don't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
operating system.
I
But
would agree with that.
they seem to be more. in relation to how the world is now, because we're losing so much topsoil, especially in Missouri. It's what drove me
Mm,
nuts about and kind of drove me out of agriculture. 'Cause
really?
people have such a indifference to the loss of topsoil.
And
And
that doesn't just replenish overnight.
yeah,
That's centuries old, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean, yeah, multi-centuries
but
of churning and yeah.
yeah, but the
Well, and also the decay of
yeah,
the forest all replenishes and provides the nutrients within the soil.
yeah,
And what breaks down the forest, it's going to be it's going to be fungus. Yeah.
yes, and the fungus of all kinds seems to be thriving nonetheless, and seems to have adopted a mindset to
Hmm.
function despite the deforestation, despite the lack of soil as well. It's
I
still
believe I believe H.G. Wells in The Time Traveler, spoiler alert. So the protagonist makes his way to the end of time, right, within that continuum, and finds that the only life forms are the mosses or you actually, just as an aside, you have a beautiful passage on moss in Black House Rock that I really liked. I don't think I mentioned that. You mentioned in the way you described him in the cave sequence. That was really cool, the bioluminescence of the place. But anyways,
well,
um
just as
there,
an aside, that's a real cave, and I was going to take James there, but the weather was too bad.
man, we'll have to rain check that. That sounds like whereabouts is that located?
It's about 2 miles from my house,
Wow, that's pretty
and
cool.
you're welcome to come and view it. It is well, it's like I described it in the book. It goes all the way through a mountain, and
Well, this is the cave state. It's no joke.
yeah,
Most caves being on private property. Is that accurate?
yes, and this one is too. I just happen to be friends with the owners,
Nice.
but it is a
That's pretty
famous
cool.
cave. It was never public, but people used to go in constantly, and the first quarter mile of it is the walls are covered with graffiti. Um,
Hmm.
but anyway, to your point, it's just
That's neat. Do you
yeah.
believe that the fungi will outlast us all?
My wife says yes,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I value her opinion on such things. So,
yeah. I tend to be in camp, uh, wife as well.
well, I say
Indeed, yeah.
that I don't, as in that proper circumstance, but it's one of those deals that's not necessarily a Christian outlook, but I do
Oh,
believe that,
sure.
yeah, um,
I could
it,
see that. Yeah, I could see the right. That's actually um I suppose if you run the yeah, it depends on what simulation you run,
yeah,
you know. Um in theory, yes, but if we're to follow through the book of Revelation, then yeah, we realistically we won't s-
yeah,
we'll probably
but
see a very different outcome, but I
yeah,
digress.
it's hard to tell.
It's interesting how, we're lovers of science and yet we stand firmly on biblical principles. It's almost as if the scientists of the past themselves had no problem reconciling the two. You notice that?
Well, I mean, Isaac Newton, profound Christian. We can go down a list of Jacques
Yeah.
Pascal's wager. I mean,
Uh-huh.
not there's not a few of them. Who, what was the guy who
It's the
did the
vast
glass?
majority.
The
Yeah.
what was the guy who?
Even Francis Bacon himself,
Yeah,
his whole New Atlantis, his utopian society that he wrote about was Christian. a lot of these utopian societies were idealized in a Christian um, setting. It's just so interesting how these full disciplines have so departed from the Christian ideal. As though they're oil and water and they can't operate in tandem.
Well, they've lost all grounding to it, in my opinion. But going
Mhm.
back to the mosses, and I want you to talk more about that at length. Speaking of grounding, it's interesting what memory or information they soak up from the ground, and it brought me to mind of that Bierce horror story you were talking about
Mm.
earlier, wherein somehow this vine becomes either a memorial or a
Oh,
replication or something.
yeah.
Um, and it's just interesting where Bierce came up with that, if that was a actual happenstance that he merely recorded, or something gave him the presence of mind to develop that idea into a story.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So Ambrose Bierce is a vine on a house. Yeah. I'm delighted that you enjoyed that, as did I. It's definitely macabre, as with a lot of Bierce's work. Um, and I see this, there's sort of a subgenre. James LaFond and I were talking about this, funny enough, this botanical fiction, which was, a lot of the great Victorian short story authors wrote about it, from H.G. Wells. You had Nathaniel Hawthorne's Rappaccini's Daughter. You had Ambrose Bierce, and the aforementioned. Um, and there's this subgenre of works, botanical fiction, where there's this mystique behind the plant kingdom, and their advancement toward us, with the desire of utterly consuming in many cases. So there's a science fiction element. I've written short stories in this vein of moonflowers and strange rituals with plants, as has James. He's got, just a shout out to him, he's got a short story compendium, Dream Flower, where Dream Flower is the featured short story, and it's about a sort of orchid obsession. Orchids find their way. Yeah, no, I think it's an orchid. um, but yeah, there's the orchid madness that came into the picture there, which was a very legitimate thing. Men died in the jungles seeking out these rare orchids. So there's definitely, well, and then there's the Voynich manuscript going back to, what, the 1300s, 1400s. We don't really know. We don't know from whence it came, what civilization. The language itself is still indecipherable, but the pages are very botanical. It's about plants. It's about cosmic phenomena. You can infer that just by looking at the illustrations without knowing the alien language of its author. And that too, when you understand plants, you understand the language behind it all. I'm telling you right now, I walk out in the woods, and there's a sort of conversation to be had between myself and the plants. As crazy as that sounds, in my studies of the tribes as well, they very much, there was a communion between the plants were the healers of men, right? There was often, and you might be familiar with this, but a lot of the cosmologies of the tribes were such that man is in some sort of a fallen state. The animal kingdom is there to kill us off, and it's the plants who are the healers and helpers. So, anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but
well, the,
nevertheless, there's a
the
lot of
idea,
mystique and strange stuff behind plants that prompts some really beautiful literature.
yeah, the idea of or the native concept of medicine behind plants, and you had certain methodologies of how you approach the plants in order to take from them what you
Yeah,
needed, not necessarily in a conservationist manner, but in the idea that you had to have a spiritual pattern to your harvesting of the plants, and it was just not a mechanical action. It was an action in tandem with a certain type of
Yeah.
spiritual world or a living environment, almost like an internet of which we understand now, like with the lichen and the mosses and some fungi have a sense of existence and
Hmm.
perhaps communication.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. We've been leading up to that, haven't we, in this conversation? The lead up to, um, I mean, they're very much alive. They have their ways, and all the peoples of the world, the very tribes of the world, have understood their place relative to the plants. And there's a sort of respect afforded to them. If you don't show respect, you die, right? I mean, you make a false step. Many have, I mean, the pathway to acumen in the botanical arts is littered with dead bodies.
well, it's no laughing matter, like you say, but you know, people have died to gain the knowledge.
Mhm. Yeah, right. I've
So
made a few mistakes. I haven't on the mushroom front, fortunately. That there's more something about mushrooms you can really wreck yourself if you get it wrong. I have made a few mistakes on the plant side of things, and I paid for it, but plants are a bit more forgiving.
so you just kept the charcoal handy when you're experimenting.
You just hold, you get familiarized with the porcelain goddess for an eve.
We're pretty we keep charcoal at all times for any kind of poison that might emerge accidentally, you
It's
know,
not a bad
ingest.
idea, actually.
So I was telling a lady the other day you can get it at Walmart now, so it's
Mm.
totally worth having on hand for that type of emergency. So
Yeah, the industrial grade stuff of, you can, if you know what you're working with, it's funny how folks will, you can get like industrial grade like vitamin C, and it's totally like, I mean, you get it in bulk, it's
yeah,
totally like something you'd get from the pharmacy, but it doesn't have the brand associated or the packaging. But you can, a smart person like you can deduce that, yeah, I just go down to the, the Lowe's and pick up a bag of charcoal. I like that.
just in case. But
Yeah, yeah.
in terms of your mushroom uh adventures, how would you recommend somebody get into mushrooms specifically? What are your goals besides finding mushrooms to eat?
Yeah, so there's the culinary side of it, which if you like things like chanterelles, there's nothing better, they're just so good, they have their own flavor profiles and everything. And I recommend, so every state has a mycological society. It's worth getting involved, conservation societies will often have events, and there's nerds like me that are all about it, so that's one thing I've learned in my varied careers and past lives is that you ask and obsessive questions, they are more than willing to share, and you just become a better person as a result, a more well-rounded person, I suppose. But I would do that. Field guides are really good. Um, yeah, field guides are really good. Um, I would kind of hold off on eating what you find until you really know what you're doing. Until you know what you're doing, but and that's where if you can find somebody, find an old timer that knows the stuff, go out in the woods with them and or her, this is definitely not a male exclusive endeavor, and just learn from them. So, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's always something to learn in this realm.
Well,
Yeah.
here's a question that interests me personally.
Yeah.
How what's you having spent some time in South America, what is the mushroom scene like down there, and how
Oh,
does it impact the cuisine?
I'll be honest, you would think in Belize you'd find mushrooms, just being how lush and tropical and wet, it is. I didn't find anything in Central America, throughout we went gallivanting, you know, jumping across countries for a year and a half, seven in all. I didn't really find much in terms of mushrooms in the entirety of that time down there, and I don't know why that is. Maybe my experience was just overly curated, but we did go out in the woods quite a bit. We found any number of tropical fruits. If you're a fruit person, which I very much am, you're going to encounter guavas. You're going to encounter, hundreds of different varieties of bananas that you've never encountered before. Sapotes, which it just brings about this. They're just so good. They're just so like, they're so good that you can't comprehend, just like I really got to give it to the Lord, just how much, just how great his craftsmanship is to create something that's so sweet and so just perfect, yeah. So if it's really, Central America is more about the tropical fruits, mushrooms not so much, sadly. uh, Really not so much.
Well, I just never knew of mushrooms being used in Central American and South American cuisine. That
Yeah.
so I was wondering if that was just my impression of it going to restaurants of that nature in North America, or if they genuinely just didn't have much
Surely,
mushroom.
surely they're there. They must be. They're on Antarctica of all places, or Svalbard or what have you. They're up in the Arctic. So surely they're there. I just never happened upon them, and I'm not sure why. I do know that the general sentiment amongst Hispanics down there is that there's a fear of mushrooms. You know, different cultures have it. I don't know if it's more of a white man thing with the mushrooms. I just and it's entirely plausible. Some regions are more prone to engaging in certain, their palate is,
Well,
varies. So I don't know. I'm
they
not too sure.
require advanced operational proficiency that may not be possessed by
Yeah, yeah.
by the natives.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too, in my readings, the indigenous tribes of North America, they just considered, and also, you know, um, Europeans up until, I want to say, the 19th century, regarded mushrooms as just plants. They're not separate. I mean, they're kind of, a subcategory under plants. But they weren't considered the distinct kingdom that they are today. I've got some, 120-year-old textbooks that refer to mushrooms as plants. And I mean, I guess it all depends on how you look at it. They share similarities, so you know maybe they're cousins. I don't know.
Well, as a longtime naturalist, what are some differences you found between your studies in the woods of, say, California
Hmm.
and then South America and Missouri? What are some
Yeah.
things?
So, well, there's different. You've got different flora altogether. Like what you'll find in California, you're going to have a lot of arid desert plants that are interesting in their own right. A lot of them are packed with saponins. So they're, like a lot of desert plants are, very soapy and antimicrobial. There's that profile there. The Midwest is, a lot of um, the totally different set of plants. But yeah, it seems like everywhere I go, I notice I encounter I encounter plants that I don't normally encounter. Like, so for some reason in Maryland, we lived there for quite some time. The Phytolacca americana, or pokeberry, pokeweed, is everywhere, right? You find it here, but it's in much smaller doses. You don't get it as much, but it's everywhere over there. Um, Whereas here you'll find a lot more mullein, so it's really a strange thing. The terrain, for whatever reason, really dictates what you're going to see, and I don't know what the rhyme or reason is, nor do I have the time to really suss it out. The
Well,
equation there. But
this is what I was getting at about certain things that seem to ebb and flow or wax and wane. Because poke, now granted, I'm far south of you, was very common when I was a kid.
really,
And my wife says it was very common when she was a kid, and we harvested it constantly to get greens to eat. Now the berries make
yeah,
me sick.
You're not supposed to eat.
Well, I know I
yeah,
didn't
you
eat
hit
them,
it.
but if I got them on my skin while I was harvesting, or just
Yeah.
cutting them out down because they were in the yard or whatever, encountering the berries on my skin would make me sick.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're not going to die if you consume the berries, but you're going to want to. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So that's fascinating. I've never consumed them. I did know that about the
Well,
greens, though. You
I
get the
didn't
young
consume them. I
greens.
just got it on my skin.
He's talking the greenery.
Oh, the greenery just tastes
Did,
like spinach or whatever.
No,
did you have to, I'm sure you had to boil it three
Oh yeah,
times over.
yeah.
Is that accurate, or is that just more of textbooky information? Like, did you have to boil it, strain it, and do it over to get the toxins out of it? Or
Think
were you
we
fine?
no, we just boiled it once, but we genuinely just ate the very youngest and freshest leaves.
Mm,
have
So
you ever heard
interesting.
of wilted lettuce?
What was that?
Have you ever heard of wilted lettuce?
Is that what they call it?
No, it's something my mom did. I don't know where she came up with it, but she would go out. We had pulp growing literally in our chain link fence. And she would go out and pick some of the young stuff, and she would have some fresh spinach or, mustard greens,
Yeah.
and she'd mix it all up, and she'd fry bacon, and then she'd pour the grease from the bacon over the lettuce a little bit and wilt it, and we ate it that way.
That's see, that's that lost art. What you just described there, that's how it was. You get something from the store, but then you'd also pair it with something from the yard, and
Yeah.
it's it's entirely lost. But that's, man, I never had that. I never really grew up with that experience. And that's kind of a shame, because I would have loved to have had that imprinted on me from a young age. It seems like you guys are packed with a more practical knowledge, just having by virtue of having grown up around it.
well, it was a southern thing, poke greens and black eyed peas or whatever. But
Yeah,
anyway, the point is, going back to your assertion, poke is non-existent. As you said, in your area, it's non-existent. It's non-existent down here anymore, but it used to be super common. And you say you see quite a bit of mullein up there. Mullein used to be common down here. It's no longer common down here. So it's just weird
yeah,
how certain herbs promulgate themselves and plants promulgate themselves at certain periods of time in certain places.
absolutely. Yeah, I wonder what the contributing factor is. There's probably folks smarter than us that can pinpoint that, but
Well,
yeah,
I'm worried about
it's an
that
odd
because
thing.
it doesn't seem like there is.
Yeah.
I
Right.
I don't hear these conversations happening. I don't see these new books being published on the subject.
Yeah.
I don't see people talking about all this behind
Yeah.
the horticulture, Ozark horticulture, I see people very much trying to maintain an understanding or recognize basic plants for what they are, but not really see that, there are patterns to their growth and development. Every few years, they wax and wane, or um, related to the
Yeah,
weather, I
the
suppose.
deeper, yeah,
Yeah,
the deeper
I,
stuff,
I assume the
the
weather
root
has
deep
something to do with it.
information.
But anyway,
But yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Um, I mean, one thing I have noticed is I remember, a good 10 years ago, I was like the lone mushroom forager, and then now you see it everywhere, right? You see
yeah,
I joke with a couple of my buddies who are also, we joke that we're on the spectrum, in some way, because we have our obsessions and whatnot, and I joke with them like, damn it, the hipsters found it out, now I gotta share space with because mushroom foraging is now hip and cool. And and that goes with, like the internet too was a thing, right? Do you remember when the internet back in the day was a hobbyist thing, and now
oh
it's,
yeah.
everyone and their grandmothers now in it, and it's sort of lost its charm. But I have to also recognize I can't be a gatekeeper of this stuff. You can't be like, you got to let you almost got to celebrate that people are interested. They want to
Well,
learn, So I got I got to kind of get off my high horse on that and just kind of embrace the hipsters and the normies that come into the space. But in the hope there too is, hopefully some of them, it's not just a passing fad and they actually get interested and they answer some of these questions that we're presenting here today.
well, I think the primary deal and what embitters some people like yourself, not to say that you are embittered, is these newbies show you no deference for your greater knowledge and efforts to preserve the craft of foraging and the knowledge behind it. And I've noticed this to be a problem in just a lot of different fields, due to the everybody's pathological narcissism. They don't want to pay respects to the people who were in the field prior to their entering it.
It's to your point that, well, I appreciate that. I could sense the compliment in there, and thank you for that. Yeah, it's more than just a fleeting hobby for me. It's a lifestyle. It's something that, changed my world, a little over a decade ago. And you learn that it's you're sort of a node on a larger corpus of work that's been actively pursued for centuries. It's not just a something that you summarize in a Barnes and Noble, 7.99 paperback, with all the trendy, the trends. But I also have to recognize too that folks got to start somewhere, and you know, to kind of just be welcoming to that. But it can be, I mean, it can be the point of frustration, when you look around and it's just like it's like a bastardization of the discipline in a sense.
Yeah, and all they know is morels, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're right.
Just gonna get those
But
morels.
I've always respected the local, the person that, isn't head in the books, but has just worked with the plants. Those people are very much deserving of respect. And they're the ones that really they have the knowledge, they have the wisdom behind behind these traditions, with that possibly without even knowing it. It's just a way of life, and it's I always feel like there's so much to learn in this world, in botany and mycology, that I really feel humbled often, where I don't see myself as a botanist. I've always kind of joked I'm more of an armchair enthusiast. um because it's just such a vast discipline. But I think I think that's with anything. The more you know, the less you know, right? Truly, the more you know, the broader the scope of your universe, and then you're just left with you're back at the beginning. So I just encourage anyone who is interested in this, just stay with it. You don't have to know it all. You'll never know it all, but just find your little area that you're into. I myself get energized just being around people that have an obsession. I don't even, it could be sports ball for all I care, but just being around people that are jazzed about whatever that thing is, those are my people, you know. There's the people around something that's, that's really makes anything worthwhile. It's human connection at the end of the day. So
Yeah, and people are so lackluster about being or developing their brain to excitement over anything cerebral that you're basically looking for another human being when you find them excited about anything. It's like at least
yeah.
they're not in zombie mode. Thank God I found another human being,
Ah,
you
yeah.
know.
The bar is that's funny. The bar is that that low that you're just looking for someone with a pulse.
Yeah, so I describe, our area as living like amongst the walking dead because
Mhm.
you know,
Oh, mm. I don't mean
and
to laugh. It's
well,
yeah.
no, I get it. No, I totally that's an appropriate response. But so I understand. I'm just saying I
Mm.
understand your excitement on seeing a fellow traveler in any area of intellectual pursuit or anyone
Oh yeah.
interested in any kind of intellectual pursuit. But let me ask you a couple more questions in summary. Do you have or have you thought about putting up a YouTube channel showing some of your or documenting some of your perambulations in the forest looking for
Yeah.
mushrooms or stuff
Yeah,
like that?
absolutely. So, thanks to you and, James and your lovely wife, you guys have really helped me to consider going beyond, um, keeping all this material to myself. I've got, I'm sitting on a lot of unpublished work, stuff that I've drawn up, stuff that I've written. Even when it comes to botanical stuff, like herbal monographs, I've got short stories, novels, an assortment of things, just a hodgepodge of things that haven't seen the light of day. At least they've stayed with me, and and you guys have helped me along in this regard. And the next step is, yeah, I do want to get the plan is to have a YouTube channel. I'm really aiming for next month here in February. I go under T B Wright as an author, and I actually have a pretty substantial body of work as it relates to medical anthropology and botanical medicine. And so I do plan on releasing that as a volume, sort of a. I'm sort of debating, is it Armchair Medical Anthropology, or am I going to go with Anthropología Medica Indígena? It's really indigenous medicine way, sort of. It's articles, it's scholarly work, it's bona fide stuff that I spent a number of years writing within grad school. And I under the tutelage of you know um, a prominent Cherokee scholar, Eastern Band, a professor, and so I wrote a lot, in this regard, and then also yeah, short stories, among other things. I do plan on getting that out. So just keep an eye open for, T B Wright. I'll be more active in getting some of this off of my back. James calls it the monkeys on his back. He's a master at this, at getting them off as soon as they, terrorize him. I haven't been able to do that. I'm more of the type that keeps it all in. And as a creator, that can be a suffocating thing. So thank you Dr. Breck for helping me along, introducing me to James, among others, and just being around exemplary people that, um, that get stuff done. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for consenting to this interview, and it's just I learned quite a bit this evening. Perhaps we can do another one delving more into specifics related to the fields of herbology, mushrooms, and uh, all that they entail. But I'd
It's
also like
mutual.
I'd also like to say, yeah, I have a great deal of respect for your work, and I'm not putting this interview out. So if you want to put it out down the road on your channel as a introduction or something, or whatever you want
Hmm.
to do with it, it's available because I'm just going to put it
Okay,
on the Patreon for now. So kind of like I
sure.
give the up Richard Barrett, he can do what he wants with his stuff, and I'm going to keep it. It's so what I'm trying to say is I want you to have the advantage of using it first.
I
Um,
appreciate that. I understand the psychological component there too. It really, one thing in the military, having folks there that are doing the PT with you, that are getting in shape and molding themselves, and you really, it's not just about, you now have somebody that you've got to, you know, you don't, now there's others involved, and so with your involvement, that's going to really help be the kick in the behind that I need to really start getting this stuff out. I'm sort of, the type that, um stays in, I stay to myself. I don't really venture out, and so, this has been a nice reprieve, and I'm seeing opportunities here, and that I hadn't seen prior. So thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss with you. Yeah.
and I don't blame you. I mean, you have your own beautiful little Walden Pond type surroundings, so I would keep to myself with, my family if I had that opportunity. But, it's so hard for us to put content out in a world of zombies, and uh, it's disincentivizing and it is demoralizing. So that's why I think it's very important for us to stick together and encourage one another so we can preserve a lot of this content, if not promulgate it, because
Yeah.
there are no masses to necessarily appreciate it at this time, but perhaps sometime in the future, maybe even as part of end times work from the time of
Mhm.
Revelations, perhaps not, but always conceding that it might be part of God's plan down the road, and if so, being willing to participate in that. Um,
Sure.
if it
Yeah,
even
exactly. Man,
furthers
that's a
God's
great way
will.
to kind of sum it all up. And yeah, I'm just very grateful. Thank you.
But
Thank you both.
anyway, thank you. I'm going to end this here and we'll talk in a minute.